Live on the call. Let me make sure I'm getting everything going here. Give me just a moment. All right. So with a good number of people, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name's Chris Berry. We do these wisdom workshops every week where I answer your questions live. I have a good number of questions submitted already. But if something is unclear and you want me to address it, or you have a question that I don't address, feel free to put it in the question and answer section. And with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So I'll hit that button and there we go. All right, so our wisdom webinars, I always like to start these with a positive focus, something positive that happened the previous week. We had Valentine's Day, and one of the things that I did was I ordered some, because you can't really go out to dinner, ordered from Katz Deli in New York, which is a famous deli. If you've ever seen Harry Met Sally, the restaurant scene, the deli scene, without getting into too much of it, was filmed in Katz's Deli. So it's pretty famous deli, been around for over 100 years, and had them ship in some sandwiches to make it home, and they were delicious. So that's my positive focus. All right, Don asked a question. I'll get to that. All right, good. And if you do have a question based on something that I mentioned and you want to see how this applies to your specific situation, feel free to at any time book some time on my calendar. And you can do so by going to, let me write it out. You can at any time by going to www.15chris.com, and that'll book quick little 15-minute phone call on my calendar. So if you want to see how this information applies to you, feel free to go there. But with that, we'll go ahead and get into the questions. And Don, I see your question come across. I'll make sure to get to that. So first, I've read about ILITs, but I don't fully understand them or know if they are appropriate for our circumstances. So always, as attorneys, we like our acronyms, that's for sure. So what is an ILIT? ILIT stands for Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. And whenever we get into irrevocable trusts, especially any type of irrevocable trust where you have to give up control, which you do for an ILIT, I always look to why would we be doing this? And really the benefit of an ILIT is protection from estate taxes. So with estate taxes, currently estate taxes are at $11 million for a single individual. If you're married, it's 22 million, 23 million with inflation. Basically, we double that exemption. So if you have less than $23 million as a married couple right now, you don't even have to worry about an ILIT. Now that said, the estate tax exemption, whenever the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act ends, is dropping down to $5 million for an individual, or 10 million if you're married, 11 million with inflation. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is scheduled to end in 2026, or if Biden were to repeal it, it could end sooner. And so that $11 million exemption will then drop down to $5 million. Now, Biden has ran on the proposal of lowering the estate tax exemption even further down to $3.5 million. So if you were to have more than $3.5 million, then maybe we want to consider an ILIT, Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, because what we can do is we can move money out of your estate for estate tax purposes, specifically life insurance, move it into an irrevocable trust, and now it's removed from your estate for estate tax purposes. Now, is an ILIT right for you? It really focuses entirely on that estate tax question. If you're just looking at protecting your kids, avoiding probate, maybe asset protection, you don't necessarily need an ILIT, because again, an ILIT, you're giving up control. But this does get into a good question of, if we have a trust or we're looking at a trust as part of an estate plan, what is the right trust for me or you? I know the right trust for me. The question is, what is the right trust for you? And this also gets into our second question. And basically, we have three different types of trusts that we're typically doing on a regular basis. And first, we have what we call a basic revocable living trust. A basic revocable living trust, what it does is it avoids probate. So that's a good thing. But what it does not do, so it does avoid probate. What it does not do is it doesn't protect your beneficiaries. Okay? Because typically with your basic revocable living trust, it just provides outright distributions to your kids at a specific age. So if they're to go through a divorce, a lawsuit, creditor action, bankruptcy, if you have a basic revocable living trust, even though it says per stirpes, if it says it goes outright to the kids at 25, 30, 35, then you're really not protecting the beneficiaries, because if they're over that age, then what they receive from you is not protected. It would be an outright distribution. Now they inherit that money, and then if they get divorced, guess what? Half that money is gone. Or if they pass away, all that money might go to the spouse who might remarry versus going down to the kids. Also, what a basic revocable trust does not do is it does not offer you any asset protection. So it does not protect you from lawsuits, nor does your basic revocable trust protect you from long-term care costs. Okay. What it does do is it does avoid probate. So that's a good thing. And there's a lot of firms that do basic revocable trust. I'd say 90% of the time when we sit down with a client and they have an existing trust, they have a basic revocable trust that avoids probate and says outright to the kids at a specific age. And what I'll tell you is a lot of the people that have basic revocable living trusts don't even need them because you can accomplish similar things with beneficiary designations and a ladybird deed. So that takes me to our second type of trust. This is also a revocable living trust, but we call this a legacy trust, where now what we're doing is we're protecting the legacy. So what this type of trust does is it avoids probate. Which is important. Most people want to avoid probate. And then also what this does is this protects the beneficiaries. So this protects the kids from divorces, creditors, bankruptcies. It protects the bloodline. It makes sure that if you were to pass away, that money will stay in the family. It's not going to go to the in-laws, who we call the outlaws, but instead it's going to remain protected. Very different than your basic revocable trust that says outright distributions. But what this revocable or legacy inheritance trust does not do, it doesn't offer you any asset protection. So it doesn't protect you from creditors, lawsuits, or long-term care costs. Third type of trust is what we call a castle trust. Now, the castle trust, what it does is it avoids probate. It protects the kids, protects the beneficiaries, and then most importantly, protects you. And what it does is it protects you from lawsuits. So if you're to get in a car accident and sued, whatever's in the trust will be protected. And then also protects you from the devastating cost of long-term care costs once you've made it 5 years, because Medicaid has this 5-year look-back period. So any assets are moved into a castle trust. Once they make it 5 years, they're protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. And then with estate taxes falling and dropping, think of this as like an additional trust. So those first three are what we would call your foundational estate plan, but we might also want to have additional trust for different reasons. If we're concerned about estate taxes, maybe we're looking at an ILIT, maybe we're looking at a charitable remainder trust. If you have special needs children, maybe we have a standalone supplemental or special needs trust. If you want to start making gifts, maybe we look at a family inheritance trust. So there's different types of trusts, but typically our foundation is going to be one of these first three trusts, either a basic revocable trust if we just want to avoid probate. Maybe we do a revocable trust that includes that legacy provisions to protect our kids from divorces, creditors, etc. or maybe we want to do a castle trust. And like I said, I would say a majority of the clients, when they have an old estate plan, I would say about 90%, if not more, are walking in with just a basic revocable trust that avoids probate, but does not protect the kids, beneficiaries, does not protect yourself against lawsuits, creditors, or long-term care costs. So typically when we're working with clients on the legal side, what we're doing is we're taking them from either here to from a basic revocable trust to a legacy trust, or we're taking them to an asset protection trust, or we're adding in these additional trusts, maybe an ILIT, depending on what your goals are. Sometimes we even have like mini castle trusts if we have additional pieces of real estate. Sometimes we're setting up LLCs to protect against like rental properties, liability coverage. But it all starts with that kind of foundational estate plan. And there's more than just a trust. We have to have the pour over will, the financial power of attorney, et cetera. So is an ILIT right for you? It really depends on what your circumstances are. We would typically only look at an ILIT, Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, if we're looking at removing life insurance from your estate for estate tax purposes. Instead, what we would do is typically look at either a basic revocable trust, which, to be honest, we don't do a lot of those because a lot of our families value this protection for the kids or protection for themselves. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me see if there's any chat comments real quick. We do have a question. All right. And let me get back to sharing my screen again as we get into question 2. All right, so question 2, kind of along the same lines here. A number of years ago, we set up a retirement benefit trust. We call these standalone retirement trusts. And really the purpose of these was to protect these IRAs. And what we would do with these retirement plan trusts or standalone retirement plan trust, the purpose of this was to stretch the IRAs and 401ks, those pre-tax accounts, for a lifetime. And then what happened was that in 2020, we had the Secure Act passed. And what the Secure Act said is that, well, guess what? You can't stretch for a lifetime anymore, regardless if you name a trust or if you were to name a child individual outright. Instead, now we can only stretch any type of retirement accounts, pre-tax or Roth, up to 10 years. So what this means is all the tax has to be paid within 10 years. And so the question, and I kind of abbreviated, well, here's the question. Can we now change the trust so 1/10 of the IRA comes out every year for 10 years? We can. So to answer the question, yes, but you don't have to do 1/10 every year. What you actually could do is you could stretch it. So if we have like year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if you're really looking to stretch it, understand we could wait until year 10. All the Secure Act says is that all the taxes have to be paid before year 10. So we don't have to pay money out annually. We could stretch it until year 10 and then in year 10 pay all the taxes. Or better yet, what we could do is create this second level of planning, create a revocable living trust that's a legacy trust where we could have the taxes paid within 10 years. So we could pay all the tax within 10 years, but the principal or everything left over could be protected for a lifetime. So this is the way typically we're setting it up is, yeah, we have to pay the taxes over 10 years, but all the principal could be protected for a lifetime versus distributing it outright over the 10 years. So again, what we're talking about here is maybe we want to do this legacy estate plan now that we can't do the full stretch out with the IRAs. So yes, we can update that retirement plan trust. What we've done in the past is if you had a basic trust and then the standalone retirement plan trust, we just combine them into one trust to achieve your goals, where yes, the taxes have to be paid within 10 years, but we still can offer that lifetime of asset protection. So it's simplifying things. It's taking 2 trusts or 3 trusts sometimes, simplifying to one trust and still meeting your goals, just understanding that with the Secure Act, we have to pay all the taxes within 10 years. All right. So continuing on, any merit to retaining funds in tax-deferred IRA versus Roth conversions for future medical, long-term care, or charitable giving? Again, I think the biggest risk right now, and we've talked about this for a variety of reasons, is that the biggest risk and biggest concern is that if with regards to taxes. So a lot of people think taxes have to go up in the future. And so if that's the case, anything inside of these tax deferred or pre-tax accounts, if taxes go up, understand the value of those accounts go down. So what we've been stressing really since probably 2016, when we saw the deficit starting to get out of control, is moving money from these tax deferred accounts, not just doing Roth conversions, but moving it to a tax-free account, which could be a Roth, could be cash value life insurance, could be 529s, could be a health savings account, or to at least a taxable account, like a brokerage account. So moving money out of these tax deferred accounts, where these are always taxed, and we know that taxes are going up, moving it to a never tax, meaning it's not going to be taxed again, or sometimes taxed account. So I think this is still a strategy that makes a ton of sense. And given the election and the pandemic, this makes even more sense right now. But the question is, does it make sense to retain funds in a tax deferred account with the idea that you could offset it in the future for maybe medical or long-term care costs? The problem with this is that, first of all, it has to be greater than 7.5% of your adjusted gross income before you can write anything off for medical or long-term care costs. And then second, you have to, you can't take the standard deduction, you have to itemize. And so I understand the thought, but I wouldn't leave money in pre-tax accounts with the idea that you're going to have medical long-term care costs that will offset that in the future, because you're always going to have income, because you're going to have Social Security, you're going to have pension. So let's use those medical deductions if you are going to take them, or long-term care cost deductions if you are going to take them. Let's use them in a different manner, maybe offsetting like your Social Security income or other forms of income. Now, that said, what about charitable giving? So depending on what your goals are, this may be a reason why not to do conversions, because you can do things like right now, at least, you can do what's called qualified charitable distributions, where your RMDs could go out directly to a charity. And then if at the end of the day, you're looking at leaving a lot of money to charities as part of your estate, maybe you leave those pre-tax accounts to the charities so that they don't have to worry about the taxes, and you can leave the post-tax money, the Roth, the cash value life insurance, that could go to your family members. So if you do have a very charitable bent and interest, then maybe you don't need to think about pulling money out of those tax deferred accounts, because you can leave it to charity while you're alive through qualified charitable distributions. And then upon death, you could leave it to charity either outright. We could look at charitable remainder trusts. There's some different options there. But as a rule, I would still look at aggressively right now pulling money out of those tax deferred accounts, unless you have a very strong charitable interest. So that answers number 3. Here's a question that came in with regards to the legacy trust. If we set up a legacy protection trust in 2021, can it be tweaked in response to changes such as capital gains rate, stepped up basis, estate tax, or does the trust need to be fully redrafted with every change? So to answer your question, so the question is, if we set up a legacy protection trust, what happens if there's change in capital gains? Really, it's not going to have any effect on the trust, nor will it have any change on step up and basis, because it still gets step up and basis. With regards to estate taxes, if estate taxes changes, yeah. Long story short, if you do set up, say, that second level, that legacy inheritance trust, and any of the rules change, we can always make changes. But there's a lot of tax changes that may happen, but it wouldn't necessarily warrant a change to the trust. Like step up in basis, we wouldn't have to make any changes to the trust. Nor capital gains, we wouldn't have to make any changes to the trust. If there are changes in estate taxes, then maybe we want to look at some of these advanced planning ideas. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. We'll just leave it. Yeah, if you set up a legacy trust, you can always make changes in the future. So, all right, continuing on. Sorry for the double T here. Bad me. I was kind of typing this on the fly as the questions came in right before the webinar. How to protect IRA 401k money from long-term care costs and the 5-year look-back period. So this is a common issue. I have a lot of clients that they get to retirement, they bought into kind of the mainstream approach of defer, paying taxes as long as possible. Then they get to retirement age, they realize they have more income coming in than they thought. They realize they lose a lot of the common deductions, and now all of a sudden they're the same or similar tax rate as they were while they're working. And so now they have a lot of, say, pre-tax dollars inside of these IRAs. Now, what are the problems with this? First of all, the biggest problem, I think, is that this money still has to be taxed. And if taxes go up in the future, the value of this account goes down. Second problem with this, it's not asset protected. So it's not protected from long-term care costs. So if you were to need a nursing home care, if you were to need nursing home or long-term care, all this money would have to be spent down. So what are our options with regards to IRA money? So the first thing, and this is really what a lot of our clients are doing right now, is they're paying the tax. And this is something that we can work with you on, is to put together a tax plan. Not saying liquidate all the IRA money in 1 year, but pay the tax over time. And trust me, if you have any type of objection to this, or if this seems counterintuitive, when we sit down and run the numbers, 9 times out of 10, it makes sense to have some type of tax plan to pay the tax sooner rather than later. I've sat down with a lot of smart people, a lot of engineers, a lot of even CPAs and CFPs, and they look at it from a micro lens of minimizing taxes any specific year, but you need to look at taxes through a macro lens of minimizing taxes through your retirement and through your legacy. So 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you that it's going to make sense to explore paying the tax sooner rather than later, just strictly from a tax saving standpoint. Like, we can show that we can potentially save you thousands upon thousands of dollars by paying the taxes sooner rather than later and coming up with a tax strategy. Again, this is the biggest risk and biggest opportunity right now. And if you're scratching your head and saying that doesn't make sense, or I disagree with that, feel free to put a comment into the chat or set up a time to sit down individually, and I'll go over it with you. But really, the number one strategy is pay the tax on the IRA. And then if you set up a castle trust, like we talked about here, move the money into the trust. And so we have a lot of clients that are doing this. They're paying the tax, and then once they pay the tax, they move it into the trust, and now they can invest it however they want. And now it's invested and protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. So it answers the 2 big problems of, first of all, the tax. Well, we pay the tax now, so we're going to get tax savings overall. And then by moving it into the trust, now it's asset protected. So really, our number one strategy right now is pay the tax, move it into the trust, and then invest it. Now, our second option, and this is a more complicated approach, is we can insure that IRA money. And this was something we're doing a lot of before the deficit got out of control and before we had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Let's say you have $1 million pre-tax. What we could do is we could carve out a portion of this, keep it pre-tax, let's say 300,000. All we're doing is moving it from one IRA to another. It's still pre-tax at this point. But now that $300,000 could potentially, and I'm just making up numbers, pay out $10,000 a month if you're to need long-term care, and could be a bucket of money of, say, $750,000 of long-term care benefits. And that long-term care benefit, which is tax-free, could also be a tax-free death benefit. So this is something that could be done inside of your IRA. All we're doing is moving it from one pocket to another pocket. Instead of having it geared towards accumulation or growth or income in the future, now that pre-tax IRA money is geared towards long-term care costs and death benefit, where we're leveraging your money, where now your $300,000 has become $750,000 worth of long-term care or death benefit. So that'd be another option with regards to protecting those IRAs. Now, third option would be procrastinate. And a lot of times people chuckle on this one and they're like, this is what I've been doing the whole time, is procrastinating. But understand that, let's say that we don't do number one or two, or we have money that's left outside of that asset protection trust for whatever reason, we can always do what we call a Medicaid crisis planning. So if you have a loved one in a nursing home right now and they don't have assets in a castle trust, they have money in an IRA, we can still at the last minute, utilizing crisis planning strategies, potentially protect at least 50% of the assets. So it's not great, because if we do pay the tax and move it in the trust, we can protect 100%. But at the very least, if we do nothing, at the very least, we can protect 50% by procrastinating on the IRAs. So those are three options with regards to what to do with the IRA 401k money. And again, the number one approach right now is pay the tax, because it makes sense from a tax perspective. It makes sense from an asset protection perspective. And if you have any questions on this, we can run the numbers. This is something I'm really passionate about right now. Here's a question. Is there any way to get my very large Roth IRA out of my estate for estate tax purposes while still keeping the funds available as an inherited IRA account for my non-spouse beneficiary? So let me just kind of write this one out and we'll step down here with this. So we have a large Roth and we're concerned about estate taxes for kids. All right. So a Roth, and if you want to email me, and I can send you a report that talks about different tax buckets. So if you go to contact@castlewealthgroup.com, I can send you a white paper that talks about different tax buckets. And it talks about, and just email in the subject line, put tax buckets, and I'll email it directly to you. But it talks about the 4 different types of tax buckets, and how even though we might have something tax-free, like a Roth, for this is still countable for estate tax purposes. So even if you've been doing like the right thing and considering a Roth IRA, and again, this is why I say, like, a Roth isn't the end-all be-all. A lot of people assume that they should, to get tax-free, they should be doing Roth conversions. That's not the only option. So if you're concerned about estate taxes, then, and you do have a Roth, or you're concerned about estate taxes and you haven't done Roth conversions, then what we should be doing is, instead of moving money from, we have these different tax buckets, right? We have taxable, we have tax deferred, that's your IRA money. We have tax-free, that's your Roth. Then we have tax-free plus. And this means it's, I'm sorry, my handwriting is horrible. Tax-free plus, but this is where your ILIT comes into play. Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. And again, a lot of people, when they hear the word life insurance, they're thinking about term life insurance. And understand that if you do have more wealth, a lot of people look at life insurance as a legacy tool. It's not just, well, I can self-insure. I don't need life insurance to pay off a mortgage or my debts. A lot of, especially as we get more wealth, look at life insurance as a way, A, to leverage what they're leaving to the next generation, because they can leave $2 for every dollar to the next generation. Plus, if we put it into an ILIT, now it goes to them tax-free. So if you do have a Roth, what we might want to do is take money on an annual basis out of the Roth. And again, it's tax-free for you to take money out, but now that could move into the Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust to fund life insurance. So now if, let's say you have $1 million Roth, that could be with the life insurance, $2 million of tax-free death benefit. And because it's inside of an Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, now it can pass to the next generation tax-free, completely estate tax-free. Not only income tax-free, which is the Roth, but now if it moves into Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust, it's estate tax-free and income tax-free. With the Roth cannot be owned by a trust. It has to be owned by you. So you cannot pass Roth money to the next generation estate tax-free. So as estate tax exemptions come down, the Roth, while it's income tax-free, it's not estate tax. So that's why, and we've been talking about this a lot of times, the end-all be-all is not a Roth conversion. That's a tool. First, we need to figure out what is your goal and develop the best strategies. And if you're considering income tax and estate taxes, a Roth is not the right tool. Or if you're considering asset protection, a Roth is not a tool. And this is answering someone's question that just came in. Can a Roth be protected from long-term care calculation, or is it just an IRA? What we would do with the Roth, and I have a lot of clients doing this, is they're moving the Roth money directly into the trust. So they're taking it out of the Roth, which they can do depending on when they got that Roth, tax-free. Now they're moving it into the trust, and now it can be protected. So a Roth by itself cannot be protected from long-term care cost. If we move the Roth into the trust, no taxable consequence, then it can be protected, then it can be invested. And if we leave it in the trust, it might end up being tax-free in the end anyways, just like the Roth, because you might get step up in basis, plus you might not have capital gains. So the Roth is not asset protected, nor is it estate tax protected. And again, there are downsides or cons to a Roth, which a lot of people don't take into account. They just say, oh, it's tax-free. That's, of course, what I should be doing. That's not always the answer. And I'm not trying to say the Roth is a bad idea. I'm just trying to push back against the idea that the Roth is always the answer. Because again, our approach is figure out what are your goals, figure out the best strategies, and then pick the right tool. Too often I see everyone say a Roth is the only tool. And so if that's the case, if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Just do a Roth conversion. Well, sorry, if you're concerned about long-term care costs, a Roth is not an answer. If you're concerned about estate taxes, a Roth is not an answer. So that was a long rant on Roths. Let me answer these questions. Does the stream of income from an IRA insurance need to be dedicated to long-term care, or can it be used for other expenses? So the income coming from an IRA, does it have to be used for long-term care? If you're taking out RMDs, you can use it for whatever, but the RMD, required minimum distribution from that IRA, is not protected. If you were to do option 2 that I talked about here, and you're pulling out whatever is in this kind of leveraged account, it does have to be used for long-term care. So hopefully that answered your question. This is also on question 4. If you pull money into insurance to help with long-term care costs, how are taxes paid and who pays them? And then do you take the rest of the IRA and pay the taxes on the amount, or do you pay the taxes on all the IRA and put it in a long-term care insurance policy? Okay, so there's a lot going into this. If you are interested in like number 2 here, let's set up a time to talk about it. But what happens is the taxes are typically paid over a 10-year period if you're to do this. With the rest of your IRA that doesn't move into that asset-based long-term care, you can choose to keep it as an IRA, or you could put it into the trust. Like I have a lot of clients that are actually doing a combination of 1 and 2, where they take a, whoops, I'm sorry, not 3. Let me step that back. They're doing 1 and 2, where they're using asset-based long-term care for a portion of the IRA money because they want this asset-based long-term care, plus they want a tax-free death benefit for the kids. And then the rest of it, maybe they're paying the tax to invest it inside of the trust. So hopefully that helps, and we can dive into it in more detail in your specific situation. Okay, I email. Oh, someone asked about a question regarding a referral. Yeah, if you want to refer someone either to these webinars or to set up a time to talk to us, just use our email here. And that's our email. Okay, so getting to question 5, how are beds allocated in nursing homes? So here's the thing. Basically, any nursing home that accepts Medicare also typically accepts Medicaid. I think the last time I looked, about 97% of nursing homes that have Medicare beds also they are dual certified for Medicaid beds. Now, here's the thing. Nursing homes play a little bit of a game that I would say is not legal or accurate, but it is part of the game. Is that if you were to try to find a nice nursing home for a loved one right now, and you try to get them in on a Medicaid bed, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any Medicaid beds available, because they do get paid more through private pay than they do reimbursed through Medicaid. Now, it's a little bit different with the pandemic, and a lot of these nursing homes have more space. So they're maybe more willing to take someone on as a Medicaid recipient right off the bat. But here's the thing, and so the nursing homes play that game. Well, guess what? We can play a game ourselves. And so a lot of times what we're doing is we're setting up, again, I hate to keep going back to this. Let's say we set up a castle trust. We move our assets into the trust. We suffer a stroke after 5 years. We need nursing home care. What we can do at this point is now we can private pay to get into that nice nursing home. So maybe we private pay for 2 months to get in the nice nursing home, and then we could flip a switch if we played our cards right, and now we can have Medicaid pay that base level of care, receive the same level of care as everyone else in the nursing home, but now everything inside of the trust is protected from that nursing home or Medicaid spend down. Because nursing homes, there's a federal rule that say they cannot discriminate based on source of payments. Okay. So once you get in that nice nursing home, you're going to receive the same level of care as everyone else in the nursing home. And that's going to be covered by Medicaid, that base level of care. And then you could have a pot of resources available to pay for additional services to improve your quality of life. Or if you're married, ensure that one spouse isn't completely impoverished because they have to pay for your care. Think of it like this. Back when you could travel, so let's say you're booking an airplane flight. This is me drawing an airplane. That's not too bad, right? That's pretty bad, actually. Hopefully my kids don't see my horrible drawings. But let's say you're booking a flight to Hawaii, right? And depending on when you book that flight, let's say you're flying first class. You might pay, say, $1,000 for that seat, right? Well, someone else who maybe has frequent flyer miles or booked it through Expedia or waited at the right time, maybe they only pay $200 for that ticket, and they're sitting right next to you. They're receiving the same level of service, basically sitting in the same exact seat as you. It's just they had a different approach or a more strategic approach on how they paid for that trip. Similar with nursing home care. Okay, if you're in a room, you're going to receive the same care whether you're in a Medicaid room or a private pay room. Typically, you're going to receive the same level of care. It's just how do you want to go about paying for that? Do you want Medicaid to pay that base level of care if you play your cards up correctly, or you could private pay? So again, nursing homes can't discriminate based on source of payment. So hopefully that was helpful. And then the last, or we have 2 more questions. One that I have here, and then one that was submitted right off the bat. Spousal IRA if one spouse is working. So situation was we were retired, and then one spouse works part-time now, so they have earned income. So they do have earned income. And as long as we have earned income, then you can contribute to a Roth or a traditional IRA. And with catch-up provisions, if you're over a certain age, you could contribute $7,000. Now, hold on, I just hit some buttons. Whoop, I didn't mean to go to Disney Plus. All right. So I just did it again. Look at that. My kids love Disney Plus. We've been watching a Marvel show on Disney. So with the spouse, if the spouse is not working, then the spouse can contribute to the IRA. There are a couple exceptions there, but yeah, typically if one spouse is working, the other spouse is not working, the non-working spouse can also contribute to a IRA, whether a traditional or a Roth IRA. And again, with where taxes are going, I would recommend contributing to the Roth IRA, depending on where your income brackets are. All right, so that is all for the submitted questions ahead of time. I did have one question come in that I didn't get to. So the question is, given the change in administration, what is your opinion on dropping money into Bitcoin or something similar? So Bitcoin, so there's been two things that really have been going crazy the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you followed them. The stock market's been on a run until basically today. We've had a dip, things like GameStop, that type of thing. And then Bitcoin has rocketed up. That said, if we're concerned about where taxes are going and the administration, I'm not sure if Bitcoin is the answer. I think the answer to that is going to be looking at moving money from either taxable or tax deferred to tax-free buckets. Some people are concerned about, well, what happens if they come after the Roth IRAs? I don't see them coming after existing Roths. I do see them putting limits on future contributions to Roths. But if you are concerned about them coming after that tax deferred bucket, then we might want to look at cash value life insurance, because that's more advanced, more complex. Less people have that than a Roth. So I think that they would go after the Roth IRAs before they would go after the tax-free nature of the cash value life insurance, which is part of tax code 7702. And here's an interesting thing. So the name 401k comes in 403b and 529 comes from where they get their tax-free status in the tax code. Life insurance, if it's set up properly, also is in the tax code. It's 7702. So we could call a cash value life insurance plan a 7702 if we wanted to. But I think they're going to come after the Roths before they'd come after cash value life insurance. And then taking it one step further, if we're really concerned about estate taxes as well as income taxes, we could look at moving that irrevocable life insurance into an ILIT, Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. So I don't see Bitcoin being the way to put money if we're concerned about where the administration and taxes are going, because already we've had some rulings about cryptocurrencies and they are taxable. And now here's a conspiracy thing. I was talking to an individual, and his thought is that the U.S. is going to create their own cryptocurrency because of the crazy inflation with the deficit and them having to print money. But that's me kind of putting on my tinfoil hat, and we're not going to get into that today. Does the stream of income, I already talked about that one. When is tax paid when contributing to a Roth? So the answer to that is it is after tax dollars. So if you have money sitting in a taxable account, you've already paid the tax on it. And if you contribute that over to a Roth, that's not a taxable event. But if you're doing a Roth conversion, or really anytime you're taking money out of the IRAs, anytime you're taking money out of pre-tax or tax deferred account, whether you're going here or over here, you have to pay tax. And that's tax to ordinary income. So IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, we call that always taxed. You always have to pay the tax when you move the money out. But if you're contributing to a Roth from post-tax dollars, meaning you had income or you inherited money or something, you have money sitting in your checking savings, you move that money over to a Roth or move it over the tax-free bucket, there's no taxable consequence. And then all the growth you get over there is now tax-free. Okay, so any other questions? If you do have any other questions, please put it into the question and answer right now because we're running out of time and I'm about to log off. Beneficiaries on a Roth. Typically, we would name a spouse as the primary beneficiary. And then if you have a trust, we would name the trust as the contingent beneficiary, depending on the type of trust that we have. So almost always we name a spouse as the primary beneficiary so they can do a spousal rollover. And then we would name the trust as the contingent beneficiary if we have a trust. Any other questions? We're going to do a rapid fire. So if you have a question, please put it in. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for participating today. We had over 40 people on the webinar today, so I appreciate that. Alan, Barry, Bev, Bill, Bob, Brad, Brian, Carolyn, always good to see you. Connie, you're welcome. Don, great to see you. Don, 3 Dons in a row. Drew, good to see you. Ed, Fred, Gary, always great to see you. Nikhil, great to see you. Kathleen, Laura, Linda, Mark, Manuel, Phil, everyone else that I didn't mention. I certainly appreciate you coming on, asking these questions. I really appreciate it. I enjoy it. We used to do workshops in one of our offices once a week, and I really enjoyed that. Really energized me each week. And so this is our approach to continue that education. So make sure to join us next week. I did send up a reminder email. So if you've already registered, I think this was a request from Don. If you're already registered, you'll get a reminder notification now. Another question comes in, Roth, 5-year hold still. Yeah, so when you open a Roth, the idea is that you wait 5 years before you pull any of the money out, so it comes out tax-free. When you do a Roth conversion, same concept. Worst case, if you do pull the money out, you just have to pay taxes on it. But usually it's not a big deal because the Roth money would typically be the last money you would touch because you want it to grow in this tax-free environment. And again, Roths aren't always the end all be all. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Please make sure to join us next week. If you haven't, please make sure to check out our YouTube channel. We have the old webinars right there. You can just Google Castle Wealth Legal YouTube. It should show up. We have all of our old webinars there. And then if you think there's anyone else that benefit from this webinar, again, please feel free to share the login, and it's just wisdomwebinar.com. And with that, I appreciate